Purple Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
All right, Vikings Vent Line every weekend here on the Purple Daily YouTube channel and podcast feed. This is the show for you. This is the show if you're a Vikings fan and you have takes and you have opinions that you want to share with us here on Purple Daily. This is the place to be. VikingsVentLine@gmail.com is the email to get in on the show. Shoot me a note there. Would love to talk to you. Love to hear from you. Love to schedule you on a future episode of Vikings Vent Line, whether you've been a long-time listener or watcher and you wanted to come on for the first time, or whether you've been on before, hit me up. It's VikingsVentLine@gmail.com. A shout out to our friends at Standard Heating and Air Conditioning, who are our proud sponsor of the 2025 Purple Daily Draft Party. Standard makes life a lot easier for those who are looking to make sure that furnace and HVAC needs are in top tier shape. And especially if the ground starts thawing eventually here in Minnesota, you want to make sure that air conditioning is also running smooth. And they have offers. They have a smart club that you can join that helps you get priority booking and discounts off repairs. They just make life a lot easier for you. You don't want to DIY anything when it comes to that furnace or HVAC needs or in that air conditioning. So give Standard Heating and Air Conditioning a call. Go to standardheating.com to learn more. We're going to get our guys Nick and Phil in here in just a second, but just a reminder that on Monday that the tickets do go on sale for the Purple Daily 2025 draft parties presented by Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. Tickets go on sale at 10 a.m. for GA and some VIPs as well. So turn on some reminders. 10 a.m. Central Time is when those will go on sale. So go to go to scorenorth.com/draft. To bookmark that and have all the details on the Purple Daily Draft Party. We'll be back at the Fillmore in Minneapolis. Should be an absolute blast, so can't wait for that. All right, let's get our dudes in here. Let's get Nick and Phil here joining us on Vikings Vent Line. Nick, it's been a while. How are you? Welcome back, man.
Doing great. Thanks for having me back on.
Of course. And then, Phil, you just said you've just stumbled upon Purple Daily in the last few months.
Yep.
How did you discover us, and how long have you been a Vikings fan?
I saw your guys' clips on Instagram. On the Purple Daily Instagram. I started listening to some podcasts on the way to work, like Pat McAfee Show, few other podcasts, and I was like, well, if there's a Viking podcast, I would want to listen to that. So that's kind of how I found you guys.
Awesome. And then, Nick, you've been on before. Welcome back to Vikings Vent Line. How are things going with you?
All good. All good here.
Love it, man. Love it. Well, fellas, let's talk a little bit about the offseason here. So, draft-wise, the Vikings just have a limited amount of picks. They could get some extra comp picks here and there, but right now a limited amount of picks. So, Phil, I'll start with you. Should the Vikings stick and pick? Should they trade back in the draft? What are you looking for the Vikings to do in this year's draft?
So, in my opinion, I think we should trade back, but one caveat. I think that if there is your game-changing running back at pick 24 that, KOC and Kwesi really like, I think you stay and pick them, honestly. We saw what Saquon did in the Super Bowl. We saw, all these running backs kind of resurgencing, and I think if we could have someone who can really change the game like Saquon did, it would help us a lot and take pressure off JJ. But if the guy's not there, then I think we should definitely trade back, get more picks, but only stick if you really like the guy that, is going to be there, which if Ashton Genty falls, hey.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be huge if he fell. I think this is obviously a very deep class for running back, so if the Vikings trying to figure this out, they've patchworked it a little bit post Alvin Cook, and they need to find a long-term solution. This year's draft seems like it the way it is, that you're going to find at least a decent running back. If Genty falls, I mean, yeah, that'd be sweet. But it's at least stacked enough where if you don't get Genty, you're probably still going to be in a decent spot. We'll see if that's the first-round pick or whether that's a move back to get some extra picks. Nick, how about you, though, man? What do you want to see the Vikings do in the draft this year?
I'd only like them to stick at that position if one of those top 3-4 defensive tackles are there.
Yeah.
If that, really the only time I want them to trade is if they can get a second-round pick. Because I think that's where the run on running backs are going to start. So they got to get one of those guys. Because once you get into that mid-third, late third, I don't want to get that second wave of running backs that the people don't really want.
Sure.
I'd like to get one of those top 3, 4, 5 running backs in the draft.
What about Nick? Are you good with bringing Aaron Jones back like as a part-time or as like a platoon guy? Or are you ready to move on from that?
I'm kind of ready to move on. I'm tired. I get a little tired of bringing back these not quite washed, but I like to get younger rather than older.
For sure. Phil, how about you, man? Is there an Aaron Jones timeshare here, or are you kind of with Nick? Let's move on and draft your next stud. Hopefully, you find the game-changing guy, where maybe you don't have to do, kind of a split situation.
Yeah, I love Aaron Jones, honestly, but towards the end of the year last year, it kind of just got stale for me, it seemed like. And his yards per carry went down. And I don't know. I just think it's time for him to go and time to start fresh and young, just like Nick said.
For sure. What about sticking on the offensive side here? So obviously Jefferson and Addison are great, and now Addison might be facing a suspension. There could be something there lingering. And then TJ Hawkinson's back for a full-time healthy year and hopefully brings a little bit more after he came back from ACL surgery last year. What about a third wideout, Phil? Do you want to see them maybe add someone in free agency? Are you good with Jalen Naylor? Do you think they need to go find a third wide receiver to make life a little bit easier for McCarthy or whoever their quarterback is?
So when I first saw people talking about this, I kind of thought, and I was like, well, I thought that Jalen Naylor had his best season, personally. But, there's talks of his drops and, like that Titans game where he dropped the game-winning tud, like that. I understand. So, in my opinion, I think we should maybe bring in some competition for him at the 3 spot. Quezzy's really good at finding these undrafted stars, so I think if we could get our Puka or our, undrafted star to kind of compete for that 3rd spot, he might play himself out of Minnesota because he gets so much money. But
Sure.
if that were to happen, but I definitely think it's good to get some competition, but I don't think it's ready. It's time to move on from Jalen Naylor yet.
Yeah, he showed some promise for sure last year. Speedy was the nickname. He brought for sure a nice element of speed, and as great as Jefferson is with separation and route running, I would say top end speed is not like necessarily part of his game. Doesn't mean he can't burn you down the field. But yeah, I wouldn't mind them trying to find a third guy here to make life a little bit easier. You bring up the UDFA front. Kwesi has been really good at that. Obviously, Adam Thielen was a UDFA. That's probably the best possible example. But there could be someone that maybe in a training camp or in mini camp kind of shows up here a little bit, pushes Jalen Naylor. Probably a good little path. Nick, how about you, man? A third wide receiver, is that on your priority or wish list, or are you good with Jalen Naylor?
I wouldn't say it's a huge priority, but like Phil said, I would like some competition. I know everybody keeps talking Cooper Kupp and maybe Tyler Lockett, but I just don't see guys with that proven veterans like them coming here for a minimum salary to possibly be the 3rd or 4th option.
Sure.
I think especially Kupp, I think he's going to try to get one more decent sized contract.
Yeah, I mean, Kupp would be fun. I agree. He's probably out. The Vikings could afford him with their cap space, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense given the holes on their team at both Trench's side and finding a new running back or a cornerback, et cetera. So I think I think maybe the best route is them like finding that second or third wave, like maybe some guy gets dropped again or they trade like a lowly pick for something later on. I can see a path where maybe that does make some sense.
Yep.
But it'd be nice if Addison's suspended. I mean, it's just kind of like a trickle down effect, right? Like if they lose Addison for those first 3 weeks because of a suspension, or heaven forbid, which we saw 2 years ago when they lost Jefferson for like half the year because of the hamstring injury. Well, now all of a sudden you are really thin at wide receiver. But I wouldn't say it's like a top priority need for the Vikings. But I think you also need as many weapons as possible. You're seeing that now with some of the best teams. It goes to a depth perspective, and I wonder if they would still figure out a way to make life a little easier for McCarthy or whoever the quarterback obviously ends up being. What are some other needs, Nick, that you're kind of looking that the Vikings should solidify this offseason? Is there someone at the top of your mind in free agency that you really want to see them go after?
Even though everybody's still a little bit gun shy on safety, I'd like them to kind of prioritize that. I mean, eventually Harrison Smith isn't going to be there.
Yeah.
You don't have that safety blanket in the back end, so that's going to be a big priority.
Yeah, the Theo Jackson re-signing was kind of interesting there, right? I mean, he's been someone Judd's been talking up him for the last year or so, and he gets an extension on Thursday night, and ends up probably is going to be in the starting fold when you guarantee money like that. Safety is obviously still an important one too. Phil, how about you? Are you looking at anyone in particular, free agency wise, that you want to see them go after?
Definitely want to see him get a safety. I agree with Nick because I definitely think Harry's going to be out of here next year. I like the Theo Jackson signing. I think he could be promising, but I definitely think we should get some more depth there. But Milton Williams definitely is my top priority after seeing what he did in the Super Bowl and seeing what he could add to our D line and being a D tackle. I would like to draft one too, but I think getting Milton Williams would be a game changer.
Yeah. It is where they're picking at 24. There are options for the Vikings potentially to find like whether it's a supplemental guy to go with Milton or whether it's just that's where their first wave goes after free agency and you need to go add it in the draft. I can see both things working there. Yeah, this will be fun just because the Vikings haven't been like big time players in free agency necessarily in a long time with the boatload of cap space. They're obviously able to get Jonathan Grenard and Van Ginkel last year, which was exciting. But this year, this next week, honestly, is going to be a lot of fun for Vikings fans to figure out what additions they're going to make to the roster. From last season's perspective, Nick, who was the MVP of the 2024 Vikings? I feel like obviously it might be Darnold, but that was kind of a bad ending for him. In your mind, who was the MVP of the 2024 Vikings?
Honestly, I think you just said his name a minute ago. I think it was Jonathan Grenard. There's
Yeah.
so many situations where he changed the game for us in such a huge way. I think of that Cardinals game when he had that strip sack, like Bears game when he beat that double team to sack Caleb Williams for like a 9-yard loss. I think I might have knocked him out of field goal range.
Yeah.
I think he was the X factor of that defense. He changed so many things for them.
It was when they let go of Daniil, or they let Daniil go, and they basically swapped Grenard and Daniil, ironically from the same teams essentially. It was like, we haven't really heard much of this guy. He's not a household name like a Daniil or like a Bosa, and like, okay, he's got the sack numbers, he's got some pressure numbers. But to your point, I mean, he filled in so admirably that I feel like they didn't miss a beat without Daniil Hunter. They may have even gotten better and they got younger. So the whole idea of getting him ended up being a home run signing for the Vikings, who have a long history of, having great pass rushers from their beginning to current. So, Gennard, that is a good one, just because even though he might be on the defensive side, he was a very big, important guy for Brian Flores on the Vikings defense.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Phil, how about you? Who was your MVP of the 2024 Vikings?
Honestly, the stat guys would want to say Sam Darnold. I want to say Sam Darnold, but there's still a bad taste in my mouth from the last few games of the season. So I'm going to go with Nick and say it's got to be Jonathan Grenard. I mean, just the way he changed the game on defense is something that honestly, in the last year or two of having Daniil Hunter, it kind of was iffy here and there with the injuries and whatever, and having a nice cornerstone there at whatever OLB or D end, whatever you want to classify him as having a cornerstone there is really nice, and I think that I'd have to give the MVP to him.
Yeah, no, important guys there too. I'm excited to see what Dallas Turner ends up doing too, with a guy who he had some moments last year, but was kind of buried in the depth chart with obviously Grenard being there, Van Ginkel being out there. Pat Jones will most likely be walking in free agency. So, I mean, they have reinforcements. They have a lot of guys that are ready to go there. And even though Grenard and Van Ginkel had great years, I think Dallas Turner is also going to get in on that party as well. Before we wrap up here on Vikings Vent Line, Nick, any last takes for you? Any shout-outs you'd love to give on Vikings Vent Line? The floor is yours.
I'd just like to give a shout out to you guys bringing us endless content in these somewhat boring months. Shout out to my wife. She kind of grew up a Lions fan. I live in Michigan. She's kind of slowly accepted the Vikings just because of me. She watches it with me. We even made our first trip over to Minnesota this last year. And so she bought a shirt, wore all the gear.
Love it.
It was a good time.
Good conversion. I love that.
Yep.
Phil, how about you, man? Any last takes? Any shout outs here on Vikings Vent Line?
Final take. JJ McCarthy will be your 2025 MVP.
Ooh, I love it.
Yep.
I love it.
That's a scolding hot take. But besides that, shout out to my uncle Jamon, who got me into the Vikings, my old stepdad Petey. I live in Wisconsin. Shout out to my grandma who I live with. She's a Packers fan. So every Sunday is a competition in the house. Shout out my girlfriend for watching the games with me and sticking up with me and such. I know they usually shout the girlfriends out, but gotta give her some love, man.
I love it.
That's
I love
about it.
Well, guys, appreciate you guys coming on here on Vikings Vent Line. Great takes, great stuff here. If anyone who's listening, watching, wants to come on a future episode, you can hit me up. It's vikingsventline@gmail.com. Buckle up for a great week here of content at Purple Daily. Purple Daily, daily Vikings entertainment, where we just want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl before we die.